Now to the breaking news that I spoke about. It's from the state of California, and it concerns the former presidential candidate and former vice president of the United States. Kamala Harris is not running for governor of California. We learned that from the reporting of The Hill's Alex Gangitano, who joins us today, along with the senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Molly Ball, who's with us, and our NewsNation White House correspondent, Kelly Meyer, who's live on the North Lawn. So I wanted to start with this, then get to some of these other stories that I just mentioned, because we're just learning this information, or better said, Alex, you're just learning this information. What do you know?
That's right. A statement from Harris just came out at 3 p.m. basically saying that she's taken the last 6 months since she lost that race to President Trump in November to reflect on where she wants to be in her political future, how she wants to contribute to politics. And she said, I've decided I will not run for governor in this election, and that she has decided that public service can be done outside of elected office. So this is something people were waiting for months, to see if she'd step into this race to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, who's term limited. And here you go. She's decided to sit this one out for now. Molly
Ball, thoughts, reaction?
Well, it's very interesting. You know, we had been hearing for months that this was something she was strongly considering, but she also has not been really out there. She's made very few public appearances since losing the election in November. And I think it's fair to say the vibes were kind of bad around a potential gubernatorial run for her. You know, I've been out in California doing some reporting over the last few months, and there was a really notable lack of enthusiasm, even among a lot of Democrats. And at the state Democratic convention, which I believe was also about a month ago, you had a lot of rank and file delegates saying the same thing, saying that they were not super enthused about her candidacy. So while she would have been the biggest name in the race and obviously would have been a major factor, she leaves this field really in disarray with a lot of Democrats who I think are now going to get in.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting race to watch in California. Of course, Kelly Meyer, it'd also be an interesting race to watch for president next time with the sitting governor of California. You know, to Alex's point, likely getting in, but now you wonder what the future does hold for Kamala Harris, if it's not this.
That's exactly where your mind goes at first when you hear this news from our Alex Gangitano there with The Hill, breaking this news this hour that she's not going to be running for governor. It really opens up the question of whether or not she is keeping open the lane of the presidential run for 2028, if that's something that she's weighing, or leaving the room to at least decide where her political future might go next. She has been, as talked about in some of the polling in recent months, the name that people keep going back to, but whether or not she decides to do this again. Of course, we were covering her on the trail just months ago, looking back into 2024 on election night at her headquarters. So she had to go through all that in campaigning on the road, being tapped by former President Biden to be the presidential nominee and candidate there. So we'll have to see exactly where the road leads her next. But this is definitely an interesting development and leaves you wondering if she is keeping that option open to run for president in 2028.
What about that, Alex? And you're reporting on this. Is this story goodbye Kamala Harris as a political figure, or moving on, just not right now a politician running for governor of California?
Yeah, I think not right now. This is definitely not the last we'll see of Vice President Harris. And I do think there's a lot of people in her inner circle in the Harris camp that think she simply did not get enough time to run for president. She was handed, you know, this pretty tough set of cards from President Biden when he decided to drop out a year ago almost to the state. And she had to do what she could with that amount of time to try to beat President Trump in November. And so I think, if anything, this is a sign that we'll see her running for president, whether that's, you know, in 4 years, in 8 years, whatever else. But I'm not saying anytime soon, but I think this is her wanting to kind of take a reset. But once you make it to the big stage of being the Democratic nominee for president, I think it's probably tough to try to figure out what other spots you'd be interested in filling.
Well, it's kind of an interesting dynamic as a final point on this particular topic. We have other news to get to, Molly Ball, because you talk thinking about political comebacks. There's different ways to do that. You sit things out and you let time heal. The model here, running for governor, would have been kind of the old Richard Nixon model, and then you come back after literally being vice president and become president of the United States. She's chosen not to go that way. But what would you say about the future for Vice President Harris as a political candidate on the national stage. You know, the success obviously has just not been there. When she ran for president, the numbers weren't good. The first time around in the nominating process, didn't get very far. And then the second time around, to, you know, Alex and Kelly's point, she was in a pretty tough spot.
You know, having spoken to some of her advisors over the past several months, they said that she was really in a deep sort of process of introspection and soul searching. This is someone who's been in public office for more than 2 decades and who, until that primary campaign in 2019, 2020, had always won every race she'd set her mind to, and then was elevated, you know, to the vice presidency and became the presidential nominee without having to actually run for that at all. So she's really been trying to figure out but I thought that the verbiage in that statement that Alex read was really interesting when she talks about finding a path that doesn't involve elected office to try to make the change that she's interested in. That to me indicates that, of course, there could be a comeback down the road. Of course, she's going to continue to be a figure of national interest, but maybe she's thinking about actually exiting the political stage completely.
Maybe. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kelly, before we do shift to some of the other news of the day? I know you covered the campaign, right?
Yeah, and as we're talking here, I just keep looking down at my phone to try to text some Biden world and Harris world contacts to see kind of what they make of this and if they're hearing anything in that world. We haven't gotten anything back yet, just as this is breaking. But that's where my mind goes immediately to, and just what this means for her down the road. It will be really interesting to see, and from covering her, and I think Alex made a great point there too, is that what we heard here is that she really didn't get a lot of time to campaign, and you felt that there as we were there, you know, on her, following her on the campaign trail, was that they felt as though they maybe would have had more momentum, or maybe potentially if they had more time, they could have done maybe a better job. It's really interesting. You think around this time last year was when then President Biden was dropping out and then passing the torch over to Kamala Harris. So it must be a time where she's reflecting on all of this and a big change in her career. And now this big news here that she's not going to run for governor. It just leaves open a lot of questions on what's next for her.
Big news and good reporting by Alex Gangitano. Good job breaking that story, Alex. Stay with us, all of you, and we'll come back to this throughout the program today. Kamala Harris not running for governor in California.